A priest, a thief, and an engineer are sentenced to death by guillotine. The executioner tells the priest that he can say one last thing before he's executed. So, the priest prays to God to spare his life. As the priest is about to be executed, the guillotine blade gets stuck halfway down. Now, according to the law, if the guillotine fails to kill the person, they're set free. So, the priest is let go. Next up is the thief. Considering what had just happened with the priest, he also prays to God to have his life spared. Once again, the guillotine fails and the thief is let go. Finally, it's the engineer's turn. Instead of praying, he spends his last moments looking at the guillotine. Just as the executioner is about to release the guillotine, the engineer says,
"Oh, I see the problem."
One day, a young man takes a trip out west and comes across a little Native American village. He thinks, what the heck, I might as well stop and look around. One of the native women notices the man and tells him he should visit the chief. She tells him the chief has the longest and best memory in the world. So, the man visits the chief and says, I hear you have the greatest memory in the world. The chief replies,
"Yes, I do. I can remember every single detail of my entire life."
The man figures he should test this, so he asks the chief, What did you have for breakfast on May the 15th, 1958? After stopping to think for a second, the chief answers,
"I had 2 eggs."
Satisfied, the man says goodbye to the chief and eventually leaves the village. 20 years later, the man takes another trip out west and comes across the same village again. He's amazed when he sees the chief still alive after all these years. The man decides to stop and say hello, so he raises his hand and says, How? The chief replies,
"Fried."
A politician visits a primary school to speak to the children. During class, he asks the students if anyone can give him an example of a tragedy. Kevin raises his hand first and offers,
If my best friend is playing in the street and a car comes by and kills him, that would be a tragedy.
"No,"
the politician says.
"that would be an accident."
Next, Marcy raises her hand.
If a school bus carrying 50 children drove off a cliff, killing everyone inside, that would be a tragedy.
"I'm afraid not,"
Explains the politician.
"That is what we would call a great loss."
The room is silent. None of the other children dare volunteer.
"What?"
Asks the politician.
"Isn't there anyone here who can give me an example of a tragedy?"
Finally, little Johnny raises his hand.
If an airplane carrying a politician was blown up by a bomb, that would be a tragedy.
"Marvelous!"
The politician beams.
"And can you tell me why that would be a tragedy?"
Well,
Says Johnny.
because it wouldn't be an accident, and it certainly would be no great loss.
A middle-aged man decides that it's time to change his lifestyle, so he moves to a nudist colony. He decides not to tell his family where he's going, as he knows they won't understand. Especially his elderly grandmother, who is very old-fashioned and prudish. However, not long after he joins the nudist colony, he receives a letter from his grandmother asking him to send her a current photo of himself in his new location. The man is far too embarrassed to let her know that he lives in a nudist colony, so he cuts a photograph of himself in half, but accidentally sends her the bottom half of the picture by mistake. He is really worried when he realizes what he's done. But then he remembers how bad his grandmother's eyesight is and hopes she won't notice what he sent. A few weeks later, he receives another letter from his grandmother. The letter says,
Thank you for the picture. You should change your hairstyle, though. It makes your nose look short.
A man with a winking problem is applying for a position as a sales representative for a large firm. The interviewer looks over his papers and says,
"This is phenomenal." You've graduated from the best schools, your recommendations are wonderful, and your experience is unparalleled. Normally, we'd hire you without a second thought. However, a sales representative has a highly visible position, and we're afraid that your constant winking will scare off potential customers. I'm sorry, we can't hire you.
But wait, he says. If I take 2 aspirin, I'll stop winking.
Great, show me,
replies the interviewer. The applicant reaches into his pocket and begins pulling out all sorts of condoms. Red condoms, blue condoms, ribbed condoms, flavored condoms. Finally, at the bottom, he finds a packet of aspirin. He tears it open, swallows the pills, and stops winking.
Well,
says the interviewer,
that's all well and good. But this is a respectable company, and we will not have our employees womanizing all over the country.
Womanizing? What do you mean? I'm a happily married man, he replies.
Well then, how do you explain all these condoms?
Asks the interviewer. Oh, that, he sighs. Have you ever walked into a pharmacy winking and asked for aspirin? A man was sitting at a bar enjoying an after-work cocktail when an exceptionally gorgeous and sexy young woman entered. She was so striking that the man could not take his eyes from her. The young woman noticed his overly attentive stare and walked directly toward him. Before he could offer his apologies for being so rude, the young woman said to him,
I'll do anything, absolutely anything that you want me to do, no matter how kinky, for $100. On one condition.
Flabbergasted, the man asked what the condition was. The young woman replied,
You have to tell me what you want me to do in just 3 words.
The man considered her proposition for a moment, then withdrew his wallet from his pocket and slowly counted out 5 $20 bills, which he pressed into the young woman's hand. He looked into her eyes and slowly, meaningfully said,
Paint my house.
While sports fishing off of the Florida coast in Key West, a tourist capsized his boat. He could swim, but his fear of alligators kept him clinging to the overturned craft. Spotting an old beachcomber walking along the shore, the tourist shouted, Would there by chance be any alligators in these waters?
No need to worry about that, mister,
the old man hollered back.
Haven't been any alligators around here in years.
Feeling relieved, the tourist began swimming leisurely toward the shore. About halfway toward shore, he asked the old man, Say, how'd you get rid of the gators anyway?
We didn't do anything,
the old man said.
The sharks got 'em.
A man is leaving a Staten Island convenience store with his espresso when he notices an almost unusual Italian funeral procession approaching the nearby cemetery. A black hearse is followed by a second black hearse about 50 feet behind. Behind the second hearse is a solitary man walking a dog on a leash. Behind him, a short distance back, are about 200 men walking in single file. The man raises his eyebrows. He's never seen anything like this before, so after a while, his curiosity gets the best of him. He respectfully approaches the man walking the dog and says,
I'm so sorry for your loss, and this may be a bad time to disturb you. But I've never seen a funeral like this. Whose funeral is it?
The man walking the dog replies,
That first coffin is from my wife. I see. My condolences. May I ask what happened to her?
Asks the man.
Well, my dog attacked and killed her,
replies the man with the dog.
Well, who's in the second coffin?
Asks the man.
My mother-in-law. She was trying to help my wife when the dog attacked and killed her also,
says the man with the dog. There is a moment of silence between the two men. The man then asks,
Can I borrow the dog?
The man with the dog replies,
Get in line!
A Russian scientist and a Czech scientist spend their lives studying grizzly bears. Each year, they petition their respective governments to allow them to go to Yellowstone Park to study the bears. Finally, their request is granted, and they immediately fly to the United States to visit Yellowstone Park. When they report to the ranger station, they are told that it is the grizzly mating season and it is too dangerous to study the animals. The scientists plead that this is their only chance, and finally the ranger gives in. The Russian and the Czech are given cell phones and are told to report in every day. For several days, the scientists call in as requested. Then, on the fourth day, there is no phone call. The rangers mount a search party and find the camp completely ravaged, with no sign of the missing men. They find bear tracks and follow the trail of a male and female bear. Eventually, they locate the female bear and decided they must put the animal down to find out if she has eaten the scientists. When they open the stomach, they find the remains of the Russian scientist. One ranger turns to the other and says,
You know what this means, don't you?
The other ranger responds, Of course I do. The check is in the mail. A passionate duck hunter was on the lookout for a new bird dog to join him on his hunting expeditions. His search finally came to an end when he stumbled upon an extraordinary dog that had the ability to walk on water to retrieve a duck. Astonished by this unique find, he knows that none of his friends would believe him without witnessing it firsthand. He decided to break the news to a particular friend, a perpetual pessimist who was never impressed by anything. Hoping that even his skeptical friend would be amazed by a dog that could walk on water, the hunter invited him to join him and his new dog on a hunting trip in the countryside. However, the hunter strategically avoided mentioning the dog's exceptional talent. He wanted his friend to see it with his own eyes. The two men and the dog arrived at a prime hunting lake and set themselves up along the shore. As they waited, a flock of ducks flew overhead. The men fired their shots, and a duck plummeted into the water. The dog immediately sprang into action and leaped into the water. But instead of sinking, it walked across the surface to retrieve the bird, barely getting his paws wet. Each time a duck fell, the dog miraculously walked across the water's surface to retrieve it. The pessimist observed every detail intently, but remained silent. Finally, on the drive home, the hunter nonchalantly asked his friend,
So, did you notice anything out of the ordinary about my new dog?
I certainly did,
replied the pessimist with a sigh.
He can't swim.
A farmer hears a knock on his door. It's a man in his mid-30s who looks like he's been traveling for a while. The man asks the farmer if he can earn a meal and a place to stay for the night.
Do you have any skills?
Asks the farmer. Well, I do have a special gift. I can communicate with animals.
Sure, you can stay,
says the farmer.
I like your style, and I'll put you to work.
So the farmer gives the man a few chores to do around the farm. That night, at dinner, the man says to the farmer, I know you don't believe me, but I actually can communicate with animals. I can prove it. I spoke to the hens, and they told me you were in the hen house every morning before dawn to collect their eggs. And you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed. The farmer says,
Wow, that's exactly right.
The man continues, I also spoke to your cow, and she said you faithfully milked her every day before dawn. And you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed. The farmer says,
I'm really amazed. That's also true.
The man then says, and I spoke to your sheep. The farmer stops the man in mid-sentence and yells,
That sheep is a liar!
The world's foremost authority on wasps sees an old vinyl record in the window of a record shop. Wasp noises from around the world. Intrigued, he goes into the shop and asks if he can listen to it. Certainly, says the shop assistant as he pops it onto a turntable. After listening to the first track for a while, the man is a bit confused.
I don't recognize any of these noises, and I'm the world's foremost authority on wasps. Can you play the next track, please?
The assistant obliges and skips the needle onto the next track. After a while, the man is still confused.
No, I don't recognize any of these wasps. Can you try the next track?
The assistant skips the needle to the next track, and the man listens for a little while longer before shaking his head.
It's no good. I just don't recognize any of these wasps.
Finally, the assistant peers at the record label and says,
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, sir. I had it on the B side.